All right, so just stand by, and I'll be doing the introduction soon.
Fire, fire, fire. Fire in my soul. Shut up in my bones. Fire, fire, fire. Fire in my soul. The promises to Zion, they put fire in my soul. Ever since I woke up and finding what belongs to me, I want my crown and my robe like the saints of old, my legacy and history. Wait a minute, I thought you were the children of slaves, but you're telling me you're kings and queens. We the chosen of Yah, the apple of his eye, the original royalty. Fire, 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 fire. Fire in my soul. So much fire. Fire, fire, fire. Fire in my soul. Shut up in my phone.
You gotta let me know when you're coming home.
Yeah, I will. I'll let you know. We're live now, but
we are.
Oh yeah. But I have. I'll let you know.
All flames in the members. Contained in our members. Like Jeremiah, cause I shut up in our bones. Can't sleep so deep like it came in syringes. Why? Cause our king is tremendous. Most high, serial contenders. Hallelujah. Abaya, Yahusha, Yahuda. Get them hands up in the sky.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. So much fire. Fire, fire, fire. Fire in my soul. Shut up in my bones. Fire, fire, fire. Fire in my soul. The promises to Zion, they put fire in my soul. Fire, fire, fire. Fire in my soul. So much fire. Fire, fire, fire. Fire in my soul. Shut up in my bones. Fire, fire, fire. Fire in my soul. The promises to Zion, they put fire in my soul.
Yeah, get the fire in my bones, yo. Yeah, get the fire in my bones, yo. Yeah, get the fire in the bones, yo. You don't even know.
Hey, shalom, y'all. Shalom, shalom. I'm Michael Israel. I'm here with Dana Reynolds. We're going to be getting started here soon. I'm going to let everybody get in there, so just enjoy this next song while I get everything shared and get everybody invited in.
If you come against the scriptures, man, we gon' rise up. If you come against our heritage, we gon' rise up. It don't matter, anybody get it, man, we gon' rise up. Rise up, we rise up. If you come against the king, man, we gon' rise up. If you come against our Elohim, we gon' rise up. It don't matter, anybody get it, man, we gon' rise up. We rise up, rise up, and rise up.
Holy Almighty, atheists tweeting OMG. Life came to a standstill and then got real with them prophecies. Every time we done pass go, monopolize the monopoly. You give us 200, take 300, charge us for the property. Y'all gave us this authority. To be honest, got it honestly. Which means we are joint heirs. Siamese twins on a trampoline. We speak what he wrote. Melania's speech, Michelle's notes. Israel hit the ground running like a breech birth cause we got hope. Hold up. Yeshua is the Messiah. It's his will over our will, so we call that student driver. He calls us his song. Sorry, Mariah. Posted to carry these notes. Addressing all outsiders, we will rise up.
If you come against the scriptures, man, we gon' rise up. If you come against our heritage, we gon' rise up. It don't matter, anybody get it, man, we gon' rise up. Rise up, we rise up. If you come against the king, man, we gon' rise up. If you come against our Elohim, we gon' rise up. It get it, man. We gon' rise up, we rise up.
Yeah.
Rise up, and rise up.
Rise up in the morning, see my people in poverty, crying out to my people. They asking me why you bother me. Slaves, we living in colonies, walking like zombies who bred with lobotomies. Even preacher man and creature man, down low with them sodomies. And no, it isn't an oddity, rather the norm. So check the academy. They say pimpin' ain't easy. I guess that's the academy. Rise, I'm getting that out of me. Know that they lie to me, no longer lie to me. The shoe have flipped up the process. Yeah, I molded the pottery. Hold up, hold up, hold up. What they gonna do when they show up? Will they ever grow up? Cause someone rather breed with a bow than to run and plant seed with a sower. You remember Noah? What you gonna be when the blow when they haven't received and it roll up? Think you're gonna go up? You better reread what you know of mainframe DP and to go up.
If you come against the scriptures, man, we gon' rise up. If you come against our heritage, we gon' rise up. It don't matter if I get it, man. We gon' rise up, rise up. We rise up. If you come against the king, man, we gon' rise.
Shalom, y'all. Shalom, shalom. It's Michael Israel here, and today I am here with anthropologist and historian Dana Reynolds. She is going to be bringing out some heavy information that I think a lot of y'all are going to find extremely interesting. I went through a lot of technical difficulties and cyber attacks just trying to get this thing set up. I'm talking about the past 40 minutes have been like a challenge because like Facebook would not let me access it at all, you know, and all this weird stuff was happening. And I think it's because of the heaviness of the information that's going to be brought out. That's why it ended up going like that. I'm going to take my time and let everybody get up in there. I see y'all are still pouring in. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Dana introduce herself, and then we will get started here. I'm sure y'all going to have a lot of questions. I already have a bunch of questions that have already been submitted to me. And, okay. So somebody just told me Facebook crashed today. So that's what we were experiencing.
Okay, that makes sense.
That makes sense now. Okay. I thought it was just me and her because I called my wife and her Facebook was working, but Dana's wasn't working and mine wasn't. So we're like, they trying to get us. But anyway, since Dana, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself and to everybody viewing, they're still coming in. We have no time limit. There's no rush on time. So I will hand it over to you.
Great. Okay. Well, my name's Dana, and I've been working on research of the Moors and actually, the Berbers of North Africa and ancient physical anthropology of Africa since the Holocene era. I guess about, maybe 30 years.
And what's the Holocene era?
Well, actually, the era, including the Neolithic, or actually right previous to the Neolithic. So it's prehistoric.
Oh, okay.
Era, yeah. So at the University of Chicago, I was able to study with the one of the founders of population biology or genetic studies, Dr. Boekstra. And that's where I learned that where this idea of the Mediterranean race concept came from, and the fact that many of the types that were found in the Near East and in Europe and North Africa up until the Neolithic and even into the late Bronze Age were actually African affiliated peoples. And that's including the entirety of Arabia, large parts of the Near East, and Anatolia up until the early Bronze Age. Most of those areas were occupied by people that were affiliated with Africans, but they were using other terms or other terminology for those people.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I have, and if, like I said, if y'all have questions, because she just getting started, but when you begin to see what some of the stuff she's gonna be saying, I'm sure the questions will just go off the charts. Um, but let me ask you 1 second, because I'm pulling my questions up here. All right. So my first question is because, of course, we're Hebrew Israelites. And so, one of the main things a lot of Hebrews would like to know or get your understanding on is who is Esau, who is Moab, and who is Ammon today? And also, where are they located?
Okay, well, that's a kind of complex question. I mean, if you're talking about the different ethnies or tribes of Edom or Esau, those people, there's some of their names, or actually most of their names, are still located in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula among the black people there.
Mm.
And a lot of those people did come over into, into the through the Horn of Africa into the Sudan. But so, for example, you'll find Jashan there, or Dishan. You'll find Hamdan. You'll find Amalek. They're still under those same names in those places. And I actually have this on my blog, all the different names of the people. So those names were, those people were actually tied to people of Canaan, and the people of Canaan were tied to the people of Israel. So they were all, that whole area of southern Arabia extending into the Horn was where the Old Testament really took place originally.
Mm.
So it wasn't in Syria, and it wasn't in the Levant, but it was in the area which we now call the Yemen and the southern part of Saudi Arabia. And that whole area was originally called Al-Yaman, or the South.
And who would you say Moab is?
Well, when you say is, I mean, speaking in a in a more historical, sense, the Moabites were also one of those people in that area. Moab or Abba were names of, places actually extending up into the region of Jordan, where the people, even in medieval times, were called the children of Moab. So you'll see those people in the Gore Valley region, the Hamida, you'll see in the colonial text of the British, people saying that those are the children of Moab, because those Hamida or Hamada extend all up, from Yemen up into the Jordanian area, or the Valley of Jordan, called Al Ghur. So those people actually are still, can still consider themselves Moabites. And I'm talking about the black people there who were on my Facebook page.
And they also asked, what about Ammon? Who is that today?
I mean, today, okay. So if we're talking about, if these people want to understand ancient history from a I'll just say a historical context, you can't say that there's certain people in America that are, Moab or Edom and all that stuff. You have to say, okay, we are the descendants of these different peoples that were in this area, who moved to Africa and mixed with other African people. So a lot of the people, for example, in the northern part of the Sudan, which stretches from the Guinea coast and Senegal to Sudan and the Horn of Africa, a lot of those people, especially the people that were originally Jewish, like the Soninke, Sarakol, Marka, and all those Wangara people, are the people that brought, those traditions of being from Canaan and Israel to West Africa. And so all these different peoples were brought over or came over. Some of them came over earlier than the slave trade, but a lot of them came over, and brought their West African traditions with them. And that's the reason why some of the Africans kind of kept their Judean heritage, or they actually remembered or kept that tradition alive that they were Jews, because a lot of these people, especially the Wangara, still they claim descent from Kur and Korah, who were Levites of the Levites of the Yemen.
Okay. I had another question. It says, we hear about the tribe of Gad, Judah, and Levi being in Africa. Where are the tribes of Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, and Reuben?
Well, okay. Well, the good thing one good thing is recently in the last week I was looking up the origin of the Beri or Beri of the Bible or the Torah. And if you look at my blog, I'm trying to figure out how the word El-Berabir, which or Berber, Beri, which was the name of these Kanuri Wangara people before other people adopted it. That word actually is related to the Beri of the Bible, who is, I think, connected to Heber and Beriah. And it actually has to do with the word fount, well, to speak, to spring. So in the earlier, let me just tell you that Heber is actually descendant, and Bir and Heber were descendants of Asher. So the tribe of Asher would be where the name Beri, emanates from. Asher and Gad, or Jada, as they're called now in Arabia, were always linked together in the Hejaz area and in the western area of Arabia, originating from the south, Asher, they were called. And during this era when, the time of Mosaikia, or Moses, and Zarifa al-Himyari, they call her in Arabia, or Zipporah, a lot of these people started spreading in different parts of Arabia, and some of them came across into Africa. So that was beginning between 1500 BC and 1000 BC, we're talking about. And then later on, there were other waves of people. I mean, you have the Tuareg and other people that also came over. To Tuareg are the people with the veils that are still called Ephraim, which is the biblical Ephraim. And they still have among them their smiths, the Kani smiths, or Al-Kain, as they were called in later Arabia, or Kenites, the worshippers of Yahweh. So all these Kenite people are the ones that were connected to Asher and Jada, but they were smiths, the smiths or priestly caste of these Amalekite related people, these giant Tuareg people were actually originally related to them, to the Amalekites or Amalek, otherwise called Azd, and Ad. I don't know how you pronounce it, but Ad in southern Arabia. And that's why you'll see in a lot of the medieval texts, they'll say that the Berbers were Amalekites, because that branch of the Berbers, or the Amazigh, were descendants from those southern Arabian Amalekite Adite people.
Okay. A sister asked, well, no, I'm not sure who this is, but somebody asked a question. They said, historically speaking, have you come across evidence that reflects that the Jewish people as being descendants of ancient Israelites? So those Jews that are over there.
Well, this is a good question, because I was just thinking yesterday about the time I worked at a mortgage company in Philadelphia, which was run by Russians, there's like Trump-like Russians, but also, it's actually mainly Jewish. And one of the guys there had a hair that was woollier than yours or even most Congolese. He was actually white. I guess he was white, but his hair was pure wool. And so so one day a man came in that looked like a light-skinned Puerto Rican with an afro, and he was talking to the lady up front, and I went closer, and he was speaking Russian. I'm like, wow. I mean, what? And then I later came to find out that the Jewish guy, young man that worked in there, that was his mother, and that was his father. They were from Kiev in Russia. So what happened was a lot of these smaller Jews or Kahanim from the northern part of Arabia had gone into the Mediterranean and mixed with people in Rome, and later also in this area of what's called the Khazar area. So you do find that these people went up there and apparently converted a lot of the Europeans to Judaism, especially they went to Rome first. Supposedly 90% of the Jews in the Roman Empire were converts, descendants of converts. And so later on, these people, they absorbed the African or Afro-Arabian original Yehud, and they also moved into places like Eastern Europe. And that's why you find that there's a lot of racism against the Jews up there, because a lot of them do have, afros, and some of them have, their sallow complexions, and you can tell that they have some mixture with some African, related people. So in that sense, some of them, or there's a genetic part of, I would say, Eastern European Jews that have the original, Yehud in them. But, when you look at the Lemba and the fact that they have more genetic relationship to the Kohanim as a whole than even the East European Kohans do, then, you start to get the picture. So yeah, some of the people, now there's a difference between Israelite too and Jews, because originally only a couple tribes were actually became Yehud, or colonized the area of Judah, and that's where you see the Lashish people and all that, represented in the Assyrian monuments. And those people actually remained in places like Khaybar, in the Hejaz, near Medina, or Yathrib, named after Jethro. And that's where David, there was the small Jewish, I guess David Havarvani came from that area. He was a small Jew that was called Black as a Negro in certain medieval texts. I have that on my blog spot as well. And you'll find up until the 16th century or 1500s, the Jews in that area of Hejaz were called, black, or closer to black than any other color. Now, this was the northern part of Israel. That was the northern part of Judea. It had nothing to do with the Levant. And that's something that, I guess I should have discussed in the beginning, is that one of the reasons I'm, interested in this is because it's been found that a lot of the so-called tribes of Israel, actually the evidence for them having been in the Levant at a certain period is not there. And that's why a lot of scholars are saying that, Israel and Canaan were just kind of like fantasies, because they haven't been able to find a lot of the place names and a lot of the people, or evidence that the people ever lived in Syria or the modern day Israel and Palestine. So I came across a book called The Bible Came from Arabia when I was working at, I first heard of it when I was working at, not working, but friends with Zahi Hawass. I used to go and visit him, and then, I was translating French works for him while he was receiving his PhD, studying for his PhD. And I met a guy from the Yemenite tribe of Murad there, and he's the one who told me about this book. about all the tribes of Genesis having come from Arabia. And at the time, of course, I didn't believe any of it because nobody had heard of that, at least in America mostly. And but as time went on, I started to realize that all these African traditions of having come from Canaan or the Yemen really was a kind of like confirmation of Salibi's book, and the fact that Josephus even talks about the Midianites colonizing Somalia and the Horn of Africa and Africa, and seeing that all the names of those places are found on both sides of the Arabian Peninsula, especially in the Yemen. You'll find the Afar tribe of Ethiopia in the Yemen as well. You'll find a lot of the Beja names are in the Yemen, the Hadan Doa or Hadan, and the Ababda, and many of the people that we think about as Cushitic speaking and Semitic speaking, like Amhara. All those people were once considered one people with the ancient people in Yemen, and a lot of them actually crossed over from the Yemen in earlier times.
Hey,
Amhara
hold
came
on,
later.
hold on, hold on, hold on one sec. Hey, Elijah Israel. I mean, she's a historian and an anthropologist, so she could teach you something. All right. Hey, you just figure that one out. Anyway, uh, you could continue.
Well, I mean, so I had my slides there. I was going to go through and talk
Okay.
about.
Uh, there's a there's a quick question here. Hold on one
Okay.
sec. Somebody's trying to call me. All right. Um. So, uh, Brother Nathan asks, where do white people come from? That's I want. I don't. That's a.
Well, I mean, the earliest known, the skeletal evidence shows that at least by 10,000 BC, there were in places in Germany. You have uh, early ancestral European or people that their, I'd say, phenotype developed much later than the African phenotype. So that's why you don't see in the rock art around the world, you see mainly black people, and then it gets to brown, and then much later, in the late Bronze Age, basically you see the European or Eurasian physical types come in. Now you see in Paleolithic Cyprus, I think, also the culture and physique. I think it was called either Alpine or Armenoid. They used to call the different brachycephalic, brachycranic physical types that a lot of Europeans descend from. They were in the Paleolithic, in a Paleolithic stage during the time that the African-related people were in the Neolithic. So they found their culture in a Paleolithic stage on Cyprus, while these other people that worship the mother goddess, the African-related people, were doing things, in different parts of ancient Near Eastern Europe. So they, Europeans are very young. That's why you have such a close genetic relationship between, the different European types. But people that, the Africans and Australoids and different other black types, they're, much older, and that's why there's such a diversity in genotype and phenotype, Now the Afroasiatics, they're closer related. The Afroasiatics, I'm talking about the people like Africans who, the E group haplotypes and the L, they seem to have at one time, not, in the last 30,000 years, I would say, must have come from the same mother. But you find in the language too, the languages or dialects, so-called Nostratic, even the theory of the so-called Nostratic origins that had to have come from black people. Whether they're in Asia, whether in Africa, I'm not sure, because you have so many different diverse types in Africa. We don't know where they were 20 or 10,000 years ago. They could have been in Asia somewhere. You have evidence of Africans or people in Khartoum trading with places as far away as Indonesia in the 12th millennium BC, and as well as East Africa trade with Mesopotamia, thousands and thousands of years ago. So we don't know at what time, certain people came into the Sahara, or they obviously didn't all come from the same mother, because they were different types in the Sahara, in different time places. And so there's also the problem that the chronology of the Sahara is kind of messed up. Some people are saying that, it can't be as old as people think it is, and that some of these people had to have come much later. Okay, so that part, everything's constantly changing in terms of anthropology and discovery. So I don't like to really get into that part. All I know is that at a certain period, up until, for example, up until the 15th century, all the people or inhabitants of Arabia, you go through all the different tribes, they're all described as black or near black in color. So it's a very recent change that's occurred in North Arabia with the the original Kedar people of North Arabia, like the Muntafik and Kab tribes. They're described as Abyssinian color in Iraq. So those are the people that came directly from North Arabia, not South Arabia, from North Arabia in the medieval period, or actually the 9th to 12th century. They were migrating from Central Arabia into Iraq and Syria. And then before that, you had the Kedar tribes, Nabateans, and all the Thamud, and all the Edomians, Uduma rather than Edomites, Duma, or Thamud, who were located in North Arabia, during this time of the Assyrians, and they're the ones that you see being attacked by the Assyrians.
Hold on one sec. Hey, I deleted him out of there, y'all, so don't worry about him. There's somebody in there in the comments being a troll, and we starve trolls here. All right, so go ahead, continue, sis.
Well, see, I don't want to get off base. It's better that people have basic questions, because there's so much misinformation out there. Since I don't have my slides, what I wanted to do was actually, the reason I had, wanted to go through slides is that, it kind of give the basis of what I'm talking about, because I could just be saying this stuff and making things up for all people know. Yeah. And that's what people have done around the world for centuries. You have people in Britain saying that they're the real Israelites. You have people in, other places saying they're the real Israelites. You have people in.
Well, we could do this. But I know the question.
What I wanted to do was just discuss the fact that, the first slide is of a man jumping over the. I don't know if you're able to show it to people, but a man jumping over the cattle there, and you see that's actually the Neolithic period. So several thousand years BC, if you see in Catalhoyuk or Anatolia, which is now Turkey, you'll see the man doing the same thing that a modern Hamar or Amadic speaking person is doing. And the Amadic dialects are the what they call so-called Afro-Asiatic dialect, right, or Cushitic related dialect. And that just shows how far up originally these people were. These Africans were at that time. So what's the next slide?
The next one, as a matter of fact, I'll bring it to a slideshow.
Okay.
All right, and there we go. So the next one, and I'll just read them, and because the people can see them, it says, Kinda Kingdom of the Banu Khaled or Khaled.
Caleb. Okay, so Caleb, since the Torah was a tribe of the related to the Judeans, and Caleb and Othniel were the first judges of I guess was it Israel or Judah? I forget which one. But so the Calebites or Caleb tribe were had founded a kingdom several centuries BC. And that kingdom extended from the Yemen up into the Central Arabian era. And you'll find Caleb mentioned with Thor or Thor,
Mm-hmm.
and that's actually the Shur of the Bible. So when the Bible or Torah speaks of the Shur and Caleb and the cave of Machpelah, they're talking about the cave of the Thor or the Shur people. See, another problem is that the ancient Hebrew dialects have been kind of distorted in Western pronunciation, so that it's hard to understand. It's hard to sometimes connect the dots. But so the only people that are really speaking Hebrew in a continuous line were the Hudhail of the Hijaz or Western Arabia, Hudhail, who were related to the Kanana tribes and Quraysh tribes. So that's where you find the earliest Hebrew, or the earliest Hebrew type dialects. And you also find it in South Arabia among the people called Mara and Shara, the black people, or the black, the near black people there with kinky hair. They're called Hadar, or Mara generally, and they include many peoples that still speak dialects of this ancient Sabian and Himyarite type.
Okay.
And that's actually where these people, the Afro-Asiatics, founded these the Israel, Canaan, and even Judah extended down to that region of the Yemen, in the Asir area, which is also Western Arabia. Right, see, all of these areas are right across from Sudan. And also when you go down to the Yemen and Hadramaut, if you go down to the Yemen, the furthest point and the closest point to the Horn, people have to understand that's less than 20 miles from Africa. That's something you could swim across, if you're good. So people lived on both sides of the Red Sea, and that's why Strabo and Diodorus describe the people east of the east of the Nile, was described by Strabo and Diodorus and others as Arabia, because the people there in the Horn, and even in certain parts of west of the Nile, were considered Arabians because they were the same people as were in Arabia at that time.
Okay. All right, the questions are mounting up like crazy, so I gotta ask. And I knew they were. Okay, the one says, I've seen on your page you traveled to Ethiopia. Do they practice Jewish customs, and do they claim to be from any of the tribes? I've heard that they are from the tribe of Dan.
First off, no, I didn't travel to Ethiopia, but yes, there are people in Ethiopia that are from the tribe of Dan, especially those related to the Bahila tribe or Habaniya tribe of Hadramaut, because the Habaniya tribe are descendants of Bahila Dan, or Bilha, as they were called in the Torah, or that's how it's translated in the Torah. I don't know how it was originally called, but Dan, or Dane, as it's called in Southern Arabia, were a people of Bilha, the concubine of Jacob. So these people on both sides of the Arabian Sea are connected, and not just Dane or Dan, but there are other peoples in the Horn, like the Yahar, who are connected to Benjamin, the Yahar of Somalia, and the Hubir or Ubir of Ethiopia. They're all one people that are connected to the Yahar of Hadramaut in the Yemen. So the Yahar are actually a tribe connected to the Benjamin, or they're also called Yafi bin Kasid, or the Kazdim, Yafa bin Kasid. So it's hard to designate which particular people are which, but yes, definitely the tribes that are named under the same names in the Yemen are those same people. Now, a lot of those people in Yemen have since, become Muslims. They're no longer Jews. A lot of them are Muslims, except for the Habaniya, who still wear actually a lot of them were taken up to Israel. So you find a lot of the Habaniya. I've told this story that I had a friend. Actually, he looked like he could have been my brother up in New York. He was from Israel, and he said his parents were from the Yemen, or which is probably the Hajjamount, because that's where people that look like him that are Jews are still located. He said that his parents were killed in the 8-Day War because they thought they were Arabs. The European Israelis thought that his parents were Arabs, but he was actually a Jew from the Yemen. His family was Jewish and from the Yemen. But now there's other Jews in the Yemen that are not related to the Habaniya that came later down from Syria and other places, and from Persia. So, but those are not, those are people that have mixed with other non-Jewish people, or non-Yemenite, non-Hajjamite people. And what I've also been told recently is that the people of the Yemen, a lot of the Yemeni Jews, apparently still believe that their homeland was in the Yemen, not in the Levant. So there is a place called, for example, near Sana'a, or the Marib, where there was Meribah of the Exodus, a place called Beit Bus, or the house of the Bus, which was supposedly of the Jebusites, and which is now called Dar es Salaam, which is supposed to be Jerusalem. That's where that word comes from. And you also find these people in early times, during the time Moses went up to Canaan, which was south of Mecca, and then later on, these people moved into the Levant. You'll find, and north of the Dead Sea, you'll find these Sulaim people that Tacitus, the Roman, talks about, and says that many people believe that they were descendants of the Ethiopians or of the Jews, and that they founded Jerusalem, which is named for them, the Sulaim. So that's why it's important to know who the Sulaim are, because they still are, many of the Sulaim are still black in both Jordan and the Hejaz, or not so much the Hejaz anymore, but I'm not sure. But Jordan, you still find the nomadic Sulaim people who are called Sulaim bin Mansur. You have Salma bin Mansur, you have Suleiman bin Mansur, you have Hawazin bin Mansur, and this Mansur is actually Manasseh. Okay, it's another word for Manasseh, the tribe of Israel. So the Sulaim are supposed to have come originally from the Jotham tribe of Yemen. It's the same word as Jotham, the king of Israel. And you'll also see in medieval times, these people had miners called Hamada, or the Hamathites. This is even in medieval times. You'll have these people called Hamada, or Hamada, like I had talked about before, that extend to the Dead Sea region. So those miners of the Sulaim were in the Bible, or Torah is interpreted as the miners, King Solomon's miners, but it was actually the tribe of Solomon, Suleiman bin Mansur of Manasseh. Those miners. That's actually a late period when you find that. And they came at the time of Israel and Canaan. These people were in the south and in places like Central Arabia, where you also find Hafira or Ophir, the mine of Solomon, and that's named for another tribe related to Bahila, the black people that are still known as Habaniya in the Yemen, or Hajjamount, which is the southern part of Yemen. Now, Al-Jahiz, who was a 9th century author, also writes about the Sulaim being, and all the other tribes of the Hara being black in color, like the lava of the Hara. So, and many of the tribes of the Hara that he was talking about at that time were later called originally Nabateans. The Nabateans actually were people. Sometimes they're called sons of Aram or sons of Canaan, and sometimes sons of Ishmael, because all those people were actually the same. And Aram in Arabian legend is not Syria, but is again near the Hadramaut or the Hadramaut region. There was a place called Aram or Aram that was their homeland. And so the Nabateans came to be called, they brought up actually the Aramean dialect emerged from these Nabateans who were described as black. That's another thing, unless you understand that these people, 1,000 years ago in 1000 BC, were still called black, you're not going to understand, you're going to say, oh, well, you're talking about Syrians, or you're talking about people that look like Syrians and Iranians and people like that. No, everybody I'm talking about now, I'm talking about were at that time described as blacks by Syrian writers and people in Iraq that had been Arabized, because the Arabs especially were known as a black people. Throughout history, the people on the peninsular Arabia were black, period. You can go to any particular tribe and find that out. The Abs tribe, who are related to Utef or Ghatafan. I'm doing something now. I can't talk now. I'm doing an interview. Oh my God. My mom's 80 something. So, no, where was I?
Okay. But on what you're talking about now, on the a person asked, "Who are these white Arabs?" He said in American stores, but also I've lived over in Saudi Arabia when I was in the military, and you got Arabs that look just like me and you, and then you got these other Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the House of Saud or something like that. So that's what he's asking.
Yeah. So the word Saud, of course, means, it originates from the black, a word meaning black, the black family, the black man.
Right.
So what happened was, in the between the 17th century and 19th century, a lot of the Syrian Arabized or biologically Syrian, they're mostly Syrian people, started immigrating back into Central Arabia, like the Anaiza and other tribes that had already, they had already mixed with all these other people. They started migrating back into Central Arabia, where you found the Dawasir and other black, very black tribes. And so these Anaiza and the Dawasir and other Al-Murra started intermixing. And the Dawasir, actually, you'll find them different color. In Central Arabia, you'll find tall, black, very black people, often very tall, and then the regular other Dawasir that are black. Then you'll find them in the Gulf region, you'll find them a completely different look. They might be still tall, but they'll be, fair skinned. And that's because there's been, in the last few hundred years, since the 16th or even 17th century, the incoming pastoral nomadic people down from the north, due to, I think some of it was due to the colonial pressure. But so, wherever you'll find these black tribes like the Hamada, but then you'll also find white Hamada. You'll find the black Hudayl or Hudayl, and you'll find the white Hudayl. So you'll find different, tribes of the original Arabs that have been mixed with the Syrian or people further north, Syrians and other people. And also, a lot of it has to do with concubinage, because you'll find even among the Rashida in the Sudan, they liked to trade women that were fair in color, and the same thing in Saudi Arabia. Up until recently, you'll find that. And the earlier Saud family was much darker than the present group. So a lot of times African Americans and other, the American whites and South Africans like to focus on the fact that there was a black slave trade into Arabia, but for 1,000 years before that, it was. I don't want to say you might have to close somebody's ears for this, but I don't know if I should say it because it's a word that's sexual in nature. But
That's fine. We got it's adults up in here. We know how it works.
I thought your kids were supposed to be asked you if they could watch. But anyway,
We taught them the lesson.
apparently there is a phrase for the early Arabs that used to take white women as concubines. It was called who were born from fair skinned women, son of the clitoris, and that's because, of course, at that time the European and other Syrian people did not practice the excision that the Arabs practiced, because that's a Jewish thing. That's not just that's not just African. That's something that came from the Jews. In fact, that the Jews and the Arabs, the original Jews and the Arabs that were black, brought that practice to the Middle East, because you find early Greeks talking about saying that how they went to Africa and that the Africans practiced the Jewish. They said that the Africans practiced the Jewish rite of excision, removal of the part of the clitoris, whatever, clitoris. I don't know how it's pronounced. I don't. So, but so in other words, that was a common phrase for fair-skinned Arabs, and it just was not very common in Arabia until a much later period. Now, north of Arabia, you do find that in Syria and other places where, Iraq, other places where the Turkish people or Turkoman people and the Syrian people had intermixed with and taken over, and the Persian people too. Persian Arabs had taken over, or Arabized Persians, I should say, because there were Arabs that went to Persia that, like the Kab or Siab, that were actually they were still black until very recently, still dark brown or khudr, like the Abyssinians and like the other Africans. So go ahead. You
All right.
wanted to ask another?
Yeah. Brother asks, he says, Sister Dana, when I talk to Africans, they make many connections between Bantu and the Hebrew. However, the body of literature on Bantu language classification separates it from the three language groups: Hamitic, Semitic, and Japhetic, Indo-European. How possible would it be that academia has intended to cover up the Bantu is the original language of the Hebrews?
Well, of course, as we all know, the Niger-Congo groups were said to be, separate, to belong to the so-called Negro, as opposed to the more civilized Afro-Asiatics, who they claimed were white or European related. So that's where that comes from. But the all African groups linguistically, according to other scholars, are connected. And I even have on my multicultural blogspot page a couple authors that some of them aren't taken seriously because people don't want to recognize that the Africans are the ones that brought those languages into the Near East, and that they spread into other areas, and that's how people got language, due to Africans. So that's not going to ever be might never be accepted by European scholars, but except for the few that have already talked about it, like I have on my blog, Graham, what's his name? Oh, I forget his name, but him and a few other German scholars had said, Westermann, I guess, I forget, had said that the Sumerian dialects had a lot of connection with Bantu, and now some people are saying that actually Sumerian is actually an early Arab dialect. Some connect the Sumerian with Dravidian, so, and the problem is that all these groups were related at one point. These linguistic groups were in the same area. So, there's some people saying now Dravidian is a part of the Afro-Asiatic group of dialects. So there's got to be all this back and forth, debate over the origin of dialects, because there were actually several populations in Arabia, black populations in Arabia, and it's likely these were speaking different dialects. These people were speaking different dialects. So we don't know. I know that in one Jewish encyclopedia, it talks about how the early Manayan or Ma'in dialect had elements of Dravidian in it. Okay, the original Dravidians were kinky or woolly-haired people that some of them still live in southern India. So I'm not talking about just the dialects, I'm talking about the people and what they look like. There weren't straight-haired people, there were kinky-haired people, and some of them still are. So we don't know that the Bantu dialects, there were also, like I said, these gigantic Negroid people there. I don't know what dialects they originally spoke. They could have been the original Bantu for all we know. So, I can't say yes or no that Hebrew is more related to Bantu than it is to, I would say it can be more related to Bantu than the other Afro-Asiatic dialects. Like Cushitic and Semitic are called Afro-Asiatic now because it came to be recognized that they're not any more different than Portuguese and Spanish, or the Latin dialects. They belong to one group. Okay, just like that. Well, anyway.
Okay.
So, and Bantu might be much older group that all these groups came from. Who knows?
Um.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say so. So that there's people that have discovered very, megaliths down in South Africa that are, might be much older than some of the stuff found further north in even Arabia, Syria, and Anatolia. So maybe some people are dating 20,000 years ago, but they're trying to link it to UFOs and stuff instead of, the people that could have done it. Now, some people say Dravidian related people, but they're not willing to give it to Africans because, Africans are supposed to be people of Tarzan, not people of civilization, especially not people of Hebrews, related to Hebrews. Even though like I say, the people in the Khaybar and Yathrib, or mainly Khaybar, are described as more black, closer to black than any other color. They're very small people, small black people that are connected probably to the ones in Jazan today, that still live in Jazan. And I was told about them by an Eritrean of the Bilen people. And I didn't know about them until, he mentioned it. And then later on, I was up in New York and I saw these very small men, the kind of kinky curly hair, maybe 5 feet tall, but they were wearing high-heeled sneakers. So I don't really know how tall they were, but they were Arabian. They weren't African. And I found out that they came from, the southern parts of Arabia. So probably Jazan. So we have to find out about these people,
Yeah. Got another question. It is, could you expound on the Moors being from the line of the Hebrews?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the Wangara people I was telling you about, a lot of the people that we call West African today claim descent from Canaan. Now, originally, the Canaanites, the Israelites were from Canaan themselves. They were a mixture of Amalekite and Kenite people. So these Wangara, Wakur people who are called, there were Jula, they were some of the Mandink, Sarakol, Songhai or Sugai, Sagawa. These people came down from North Africa. Originally they were called Beri Beri. Some of the Zagai, still called Beri Beri. And the Imraguen in Mauritania, the fishermen of Mauritania, all these people were originally Jews, or they claimed to be, before they became Muslim, they were, according to the text, they were Jews. So, but they also claim to have come down from the north, from places like Wargla and Mauritania. Okay, so Mauritania is now what's called Morocco, and Tunisia, Algeria. Okay, and those people in Morocco that started moving down, over time, they started moving down with the Tuareg, who are a later, they're called Amazigh or Maziks. The Maziks, Ethiopians, the camel riding people. Okay, so these people all used to live further north. A lot of these people, before the rise of Songhai and Mali and even Ghana, used to live much further north, and even in the mountains of, Mauritania, which were Tangiers and places like that. So these Berry people were the ones that were described by ancient writers. For example, I have on my slide, I was going to talk about how, Isidore of Seville called the Moors of Morocco, because that's where, he didn't, the Moors that were known to the Crusaders and the early medieval writers were actually in the coastline of North Africa, and that's why they were described as black, because at that time most of the coastline of North Africa was occupied by these Zagai and Tuareg people. Okay, so in the mountains of Tangier, you find in the 8th century Latin Mozarabic text that when they, that the color of the Moors was such that it scared the horses of the Syrians that had been, they'd been fighting with. They wouldn't come near them because they would start gnashing their teeth. And that gnashing against the blackness probably scared, the horses. And Saint Isidore also calls them in the 8th century or 7th century black as night. The Moors were black as night, while the Goths were white, he says. He also says that about the Garamantes. He says the Garamantes were an Ethiopian people, which people like to forget conveniently, meaning a black people. Meaning a black people, because that's what they called in general Ethiopians. Just like Jerome considered the Nubians and the Moors to be an Ethiopian people, just because they were black. So that word Ethiopian had come to mean, come to signify the people that were in North Africa that were black. Even Strabo says there were a group of very tall, was it Strabo or Diodorus? There was very tall Ethiopian people that came into North Africa. He might have been talking about the Tuareg. But anyway, yes, the Songhai, the smiths caste, and the miners and the traders, scholar class of the Moors were these Wangara, Songhai people in West Africa, and they were originally Jewish, but they were also Moors. The word Moor did not mean just Muslim or, it meant Christian Jew or Muslim that was of a Berry origin.
Okay.
Berry is the indigenous name of the Zagawa people, also called Zawaga in Portugal and Spain. Zawaga.
Okay.
So, and you'll see in the Arabic text also they'll call them El Barabir. That was their name for these Soni people, El Barabir. So this name has been taken over by other people that are now in North Africa who are descendants of both the Andalusians and Syrians and other people, along with the Berry. Now they have not, most of them have not wanted to, say they're related to Africans. So that's why you'll see that in the last 200 years, people like the French have come in and said, oh, the Berbers were the fairer skinned Berbers, while the other ones were just, those were mixed with the Negro or Negro people. Also, Grafton Elliott Smith, who was an Australian anatomist, he went into Morocco, though, in the 19th century, I think it was, or early 20th, and he said that the word Moor was only used by the Moroccans for the people of Negro blood, people who had Negro blood. That's the word they used back then, Negro. So, and today the word Moor refers to the Hassaniya and Trarza Berbers, or Trarza Arab people who are part, and Hassaniya who are part, actually probably more Arab than they are Berber, because the Arabs that came across in the 9th century to the 12th century in North Africa were also black. Okay, the Sulaim, they were descendants of the Sulaim and Hawazin Mansur, and that's why they still look, they're a mixture of Arab and Berber people, and that's why they still look the way they do.
Okay. All right. And another question we have is, it says, if possible, could you give us a better understanding of who Japheth is? We read a lot about the sons of Shem and Ham, but not so much about Japheth.
Well, in the beginning, when these Afro-Asiatic people started spreading, Judaism and Christianity and Islam to people like the Persians, and they were taken over there into Persia, and what happened was these people adopted a lot of their allegories and started putting themselves into the history of Afro-Asiatic people. And so you have this idea came about that Ham was black and Shem was middle black, or middle, between white and black, and then Japheth was, related more to the fair skinned or white people. And that's because, the early people that spread abroad, they settled in those places. Like Joseph has said, those names were originally for the original inhabitants that settled in those places. Now, Javan, for example, Yavan or Javan in Arabic writings up until the Middle period is one of the Arab tribes, of the southern Arabia, from Kedar, descended from Kedar. And Japhet also is called. In fact, I could show you a text, or look. I'll post it later. A text that says Japhets were all the tribes of Negroes that spread across the Sudan. So that's how it was described. The European translation of, I don't know what the word Negro was. The Arabs didn't use the word Negro. They used either Zanj or Sudan, the Sudan, Al Sudan, or Gnawa or Ajnawan, things like that. So I don't know what word was used, but the sons of Japheth were those who connected with Urtet, or that Nubian area called Arthet, and which is actually the biblical Arthet, and spread across the Sudan. That's what the Arabian writers said. So all that stuff about Ham, Shem, and Japheth being different populations around the world is, that came in much later, 1,000 years after this was written. And Japhet referred to the tribes like Yavan or Yawan, these tribes that spread into the Mediterranean and then settled among these European non-Afro-Asiatic people. I mean, you find Togomat and Gomer among the Berber tribes, the Tuareg tribes. Togoma, and that's because, like I said, these people settled not only in North Africa, but along the Mediterranean, and they brought their, connections with them. Ashkenaz, the word Ashkenaz also is connected to that. Ishkuz or Ashkenaz, and it really refers to the Pleiades, was also brought to those areas by the Jews or the original Afro-Asiatic people. Okay, so, and you find that, I know that from the Iranian texts, which also speak of the Ashkuz or Ashkenaz, and explain that word actually is related to the Pleiades. In fact, a lot of the earliest personages of the Genesis are actually names related to the planets and stars and their motions, So that's where that comes from. But yeah, no, all the Bible was about, or all the Genesis book of the Bible was about these people that settled in the Yemen, or that area south of Syria, extending to Central Arabia. Because actually Central Arabia was part of the Yemen at that time anyway, and the Hijaz was part of the Yemen, or the south.
Okay. Somebody asked a question. They said, "Do you believe that the seed of the white man is mixed with Neanderthal, or spoiled with non-original genealogy?"
Um, you have to understand, when you're going back that far, all of us, what was that tribe in New Guinea? New Guinea have the strongest or the largest amount of DNA that's Neanderthal, New Guinean blacks. So, but yes, European have more Neanderthal DNA than Africans do. Africans also, some Africans mixed with another early type of pre-human, pre-human. So, and I don't know, I don't remember a lot about that, but I know that certain Africans also have, that pre-human hominid type. So I don't really focus on, trying to demean different races or different, just because they were fair skinned, and just because, they did take over a lot of the Afro-Asiatic heritage. But now, there was a reason that heritage was not known to Afro-Asiatics for a long period, and now it's coming back. So just appreciate it, and don't, we don't need to go into why the white, so-called white people were in the caves for long, whatever. I mean, there were still troglodytes in Africa, in Berberia for a long time too. That's where the so-called Medina settled. They lived in caves. They still do, some of them, the Sabi tribes around the Eritrean Sea, the troglodytes. Joseph has said the Medinites settled in the troglodyte area of Africa. Okay, so that's where a lot of the Ethiopians, even in north, the Maghreb, you'll see these troglodyte areas, people living in grottos. So, and I'm sure North Africans could tell you about that. So, but yeah.
All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, so I was just saying some of, but the main thing is that apparently there was some mutation where some African people lost their color, either over time or suddenly, and those populations started, they were isolated from the rest of the black people, and they started spreading. I mean, you had the red-haired people were in a certain place, and you had blonde-haired people in a certain place. And you also had the Eurasian dark-haired people that first came in contact with Afro-Asiatic peoples and culture probably in the Chalcolithic era, Copper Age and Chalcolithic era. So that was several thousand years, or a few thousand years BC in the Near East. So you see the different skeletons, the so-called gracile Mediterranean type of that's connected to these Almatic people and Somali and people like that, and the Eurafricans, so-called Eurafricans, who are disconnected to the larger boned Africans, and then you had the Brachicranic white Eurasian people. So they started mixing, very early in the Near East, but apparently Arabia, there wasn't really, that remained mainly Afro-Asiatic. And, north of that, you had the different cultures that were mixing or absorbing these non-Afro-Asiatic peoples too. And in by the late Bronze Age, Anatolia was, half or more than half white, or what's called Turkey. So by that very early period, these people were, a lot of these people were not African. Now, apparently some of the Africans must have, probably the Phoenician Manaean people settled along the coast of the Mediterranean, because you find a 6th century AD Bulker manuscript talking about how the sons of Ham were occupying the coast of the Mediterranean, Syria and places like that. Now you still do find in Syria like I said, this valley of Jordan or the Gore area, these black Syrian people, nomads, and Bedouin and settled people there, who are descendants of the Hamathites and the Canaanites, and the Israelites. So you do find them even in Israel, but unfortunately, a lot of the modern media from that area and in America and the West tries to make these people African when they've been there for thousands of years. Those regions have been described thousands of years as black. That's why you had the Greeks talking about the black Syrians and the white Syrians. They separated the black Syrians of Cappadocia or that area of Mesopotamia, Turkey, Syria from each other. So in Armenia too, you'll find people claiming descent from the Adites, from ancient black people. And some of them know, that they were, for example, in Edessa in Turkey, you'll find where the king that supposedly had the Shroud of Turin, he was Ukama Akbar or Akbar Ukama, Akbar the Black, an Arabian, or descendant of the Arabians that had colonized that era. Because in the Nabatean, the Salini people of northern Arabia had actually colonized different areas, and they were the earliest Christians there, and that's why you find the Russians portraying a lot of the early prophets and Christian prophets, Christian Christian what are they called? Not popes. But anyway, the Christian saints and stuff as black. They're portrayed as black, the earliest ones, including Saint Nicholas, that kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Brother Sean asks, let me go to his question. All right. He said, what has the data shown you as far as the connection between the ancient Israelites and African Americans today?
Well, it show what all we can say is that modern Africans come from the Sonic. We know that from DNA, in terms of DNA, and modern Africans come from the Sonic, Songhai, Hausa, and many tribes that are claiming to come from Canaan and still have the names of the Israelite Canaanite people. The Igbo also, the Yoruba also claim that, the Akan claim that, or certain groups of the Akan, Yoruba, and Igbo claim that they came from either Israel or Canaan. The Hausa as well, and Misra, which was also the name of Misraim, was the name of a place next to Israel. So that's where you get the term, you get the exodus from that area, Misra, or which is wrongly interpreted as the modern Egypt. So that's another aspect people need to know about, that these places like Misra, Israel, Canaan, they're mentioned actually in inscriptions of the ancient Musnad type, which is the ancient South Arabian type, that only the modern dark-skinned people speak that dialect now in Yemen. And those dark-skinned people also, like the Al-Qatira or Ketura, and the Ikar al-Khara or Kura, and all these other descendants of the Midianite, Israelite, Canaanite people that are still located in that area and still are still known under their same names and speak that ancient dialect. It's now called Sabian or Himyaritic related. Those people claim to have come from Africa in a remote period. So we know there's definitely a connection. They don't claim to have come from, Syria. They claim to have come from Africa in a remote period. But that period was so remote that, this is before Musaikia, or Moses, as it's Musa, as it's called in the Quran and in the Torah. Moses, before, you know, he existed, these people had settled in Arabia. And we don't know if they came from Asia, if they came from Africa. We know that certain of them came from Africa. Certain of them were already in, Sumeria. We find this big prognathic, big Eurafrican type, so-called Eurafrican, because they're called Eurafrican because they're also found in, early Paleolithic Europe. So these big African types that are still in Central Arabia, also they might have, I don't know where they came from, because, or they could have come from the Mectoid types of North Africa. I don't know, but I do know that there were different populations in Arabia. We don't know who was speaking what dialect. There, like I said, there could have been other dialects in Arabia that have died out, and people have been Arabized, people have been Semitized or Hamitized, because people called Semites were actually the so-called Hamites anyway. The Hamathites, they all came from that area of the Yemen and they spread abroad. And most of the spread into Africa occurred, like I say, before 1000 BC. So that's why you don't have, you do have archaeological evidence of people coming into the Yemen from the Yemen at that time. But the problem is the chronology of the dynastic Egypt is so messed up, and the Near East is so much messed up that people have kind of ruled out that these people could have come in from other places. For example, there's alternative chronologists that are saying that Egypt, the dynastic period of Egypt is completely, messed up, and it was that some of these people were actually living much later on, and that's why you find people that look just like the Israelites, with the Syrian, with these side curls, side locks, but you still find them among the ancient Libyans as well. As and the people that retained that practice of wearing the side locks were the Fulada or Fulani people, Wudabi as they're now called, pastoralist people. So yeah, so that's one of the problems with why archaeologists couldn't figure out where people were coming from, and why they don't believe that the Africans have much to do with the Yemen, even though on both sides of or even northern, like in Jordan, you find different tribes with the same names as Africans, like the Quran people are still found in the Wadi Qura area in Arabia. And other tribes of Jordan, the ancient people called the Hawats, Moors, or El Hawait, are still in the Hawatite area, among those tribes there, and that's the same name as was the earliest Moorish Libyans. Some of the Moorish Libyans were called Lihawait, and that word means El Hawait actually means Hivite. So Hivite, that name was carried into North Africa by the Hawait bin Ham. They call themselves still the Hawait bin Ham. And the Hawatite also, this group in Jordan, that's why I wanted to see to use my slides, because those tribes still have many of the Sulaim and Hawazin Mansur people among them. Now the name Sulaim is translated as Shalom in medieval Jewish text. Shalom is actually translated as Sulaim. So Shalom and all those people, descendants of Shalom in the Bible, or the Judean people, are still found among these Hawatite people who came originally from Tehama, further south. So it's just a lot of information. I don't know if people are able to follow it, but
they're following it for sure. And what another probably maybe it might be simple question, but they said where did the name Africa come from?
Yeah, that's a simple one, because the word Afrikia was the name for Tunisia, the area around Tunisia, and the people called that were supposedly descendants of Iphicus Tuba, the Himyarite, otherwise called Ephraim or Afrin or Afar. Now they're called Afar. This is Medinites that came into Africa. They settled in North Africa or the Maghreb, just like Ibn Rakik said. The Sabians settled and spread, in the Maghreb. So that's actually a name related to, the Afrik or Ifrikush, Afrin the Medianite, and Ephraim. As they moved northward into the Assyria region, there was Ephraim, and also there's also, people call the Ephraim or Ephraimites, who Ephraim was the brother of Manasseh, among the Tuareg. So they still call themselves the Ephraim. And if you look in the Book of Judges, you'll see how the Ephraim are called the people who have their roots in Amalek. So they just carried their names, across Africa with them. And they had people among them called Kenites. And that's where these Sonink people, come from. These Sonink Smiths called Kenites and Hamathites come from. They're also called Hadahid, a name which is related to Hittite, because the Hamathite, Hittite, Kenite, Kauaian people were all, connected people. And it's these Smiths people that actually worshipped Yahweh. So those were the people that brought, the worship of Yahweh and became the Judeans. Even though they try to separate the Kenites and say that they were Hamathites are people of Ham instead of Semites. So that's how that worked.
Okay. All right.
The word Semite, by the way, Shem or Shimron, had to do with, and it's Hemron. It's still used in certain places among the Bedouin and the settled people to separate them. It's usually the Shem, meaning the pastoral nomadic people, and the client tribes, meaning the Himron. So that's where that comes from. It doesn't mean like completely different people. It originally referred to caste of people, different classes or caste of people.
Okay. Cool. All right. Let me see what else I got here. So somebody asked, how did the term Moor come to signify black men?
Because
And they said example Saint Maurice.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what they were. I mean, they were. Those were the people that the Europeans first came into contact with when they came into North Africa, were the Moors, and they were all, of course, they were all black at that time. So that just meant, just the same way the word Niger or Nigri, I don't know how it was pronounced back then by the Romans, and the Greeks, but Nigri or Nigritai was a name for a particular group of people settled around the Niger or Great River, the River Gur, and that became a word for the black people.
Okay.
And in the the 9th century or the 10th century, 9th century, the Danes or Vikings wrote in their texts that the Mori were the same as same as Nigri, and the Mauritanians were the same as Negro land.
Hmm.
The land of the Negro, Nigger, whatever. Yeah,
Right.
that word actually, it's just the matter of pronunciation. That's how people pronounce it. Like the Scotch, Irish, that's how they pronounce the word Negro. The Negro is a Spanish pronunciation of the same word.
Right.
And the Latins pronounce it Niger, but it originally was not a bad word. It was just the name for the people of the Great River, or the people that were around them. I mean, since they were all black, that became to mean black.
Okay.
Now Gur or Kura is in Semitic or Afro-Asiatic dialects. That word means river. That's where that comes from
Okay.
originally. Now the Moors, as you
looks like her computer hung up. All right, there she goes. It looks like you're skipping a little bit. I think you're good now.
okay, the Itinerarium Periginorum, I don't know how you pronounce it either. But it's a Crusader text that talks about the Moors and says that the Moors received their name for the black color coming from the south. Now, that's because by that time, the word Moor had come to mean those of black color, those people, men of black color. And the same thing, well, the Saracens too at that time, the people that were invading the Crusaders from Palestine were mainly Yemenite and Hijazi Arabians. And since they were the same color as the Moors, basically, they were called black as soot. And they're usually in representations in Europe, they're represented as black men. So the word Moor in later times too was used. Some Portuguese writer, I think, uses the word Moor force. He says that the Waga were called Moor force, meaning the star Moor, which is possibly a name of Mars, because Nonnus, who was an ancient writer, Greek writer or Byzantine writer of Dionysiaca, he said that the Moors were called children of Ares. He writes of them as children of Ares.
Okay.
And that word could have come across, from the Amorites or the Canaanite people that they were. So Amaru and Marduk or Martu, the Martu or the Martians. The word Mars comes from that, is related to Martu and Marduk, the name for the Amorite and their deity. Because, like I say, most of these people actually were also known by the particular deity that they were associated with.
Okay.
Totemically.
All right. Yeah, and people have been asking, and they want to know your contact information, email. If they want to know if you're on YouTube. I know you're on Facebook. If you can you give out that information so people, if they want to, of course, learn more, like I see a lot of them do, where they could go?
Well, I mean, they can go to my blogspot is Afroasiatics, one word, Afroasiatics.blogspot.com. And that's where they need to go before they start asking a lot of questions. And they can also contact me through there, make a comment, ask a question through there. That's the best way. Or go to the Facebook page and, contact me through Messenger.
And the name on your Facebook page is, go ahead and tell them that, because you also have that.
I think it's Dana Reynolds Marniche, Marniche.
Okay.
I think. I don't know. I can't see it.
Yeah. So yeah, she has a
You have
Marniche
the
on
link
it.
up there. You have the link too. You can put it.
Yeah.
Right?
Let me try to get it up there, because I see from the response and everything, I'm gonna definitely have you on here again. And what I'm gonna probably try to set up and do is get you on here with Ron Dalton. And I mean, between the two of y'all can really, there's a lot that y'all can bring out. But let me see.
Well, as long as he's an academic.
Oh, he is. Yeah, he absolutely
I'm
is.
not. Yeah, because it's not useful just to keep saying things and not having like the resources, the 2 or 3 references to back up what you're saying.
Yeah, and he does the same type of studying you do.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Mm-hmm.
For example, a lot of people, I hear a lot of nonsense on YouTube and elsewhere talking about Edomites being so-called European, that kind of thing, which actually comes from the Talmud, a later translation or one of the Hebraic European commentarists. But it has nothing to do with the with the original Hebrews who are still there under their same name. The Edomites, all those people are under the same name in Central Arabia mostly, and among the Dawasir. So if you want to see Shubael or Shobal, Ithran or Bathran, they're still called Badaran. And those people, according to the Arab translations, actually descend from the Edomites actually came directly from the Aram, people called Aram, that lived down there.
Okay.
And the Aram are actually the Kaza or Kuza tribe, or Hazo, as they call them in the Torah. Hazo and Uz are actually the Kuza tribe or Kaza, and the Aus tribe. And those people are settled now in the region of between Mecca and Medina, or were settled in medieval times between Mecca and Medina.
Okay.
And later on, the Nabateans, and that's why they say the Nabateans are sons of Aram.
Okay.
Debate.
So this is her Facebook page right here. This is her Facebook page. And if you go to her Facebook page, there's links to right here to her Afroasiatic blogspot.com page and some other academia pages. So you just click on those and I'll click on it and bring that page up. Afroasiatic and Odyssey in black. And there is a ton of information here. Plenty of good reading. Okay? And I'm sure most of your questions can get answered just by surfing around there. And like she said, if you have any questions or anything, she said just contact her. Or put a comment in there. I'ma definitely have her on the show again. Because like I said, we were live and I saw there was a lot of viewers in here while we were live, and it's the middle of the day. By the end of the day, this video gotten a ton of views and questions. And I'm sure, like I said, we'll definitely bring you on again. Definitely appreciate you being patient with me, working through all the technical difficulties,
Oh, that's fun. So is this over so soon?
Yeah. And like I said, we're gonna do it again. And the way I want to do it though is and it's gonna be soon. But the way I want to do it is have your slides up and have it set up so you can see your slides, and then there's a way I can set it up to where you could even control your slides. So I'm gonna work on setting that up and making it so it could be more edifying, and you can bring your information out the way you want to. But my main objective was I wanted the people introduce you to the people so they could see the level of knowledge that you have. So yeah, absolutely. Sister asks, are you on YouTube?
No, I'm on YouTube just as I don't have any information on there. I have a lot of videos on YouTube that are on other people's sites.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I saw that on there too.
Yeah, different videos. If you go to like Lord Abba has some stuff, and some other Moorish Men's Moorish Summit. You can go there, but put my name in, Dana Reynolds, or Dana Reynolds Marniche, Dana Marniche, Marniche. There's about 7, maybe more videos now on there.
Okay.
The Night Watch Expressions, John Akhenaten had something, I think, on his, and also a few radio things. I don't know if it's still up, but Yeah, I haven't even had time to get to YouTube stuff because I've been working on a book. I don't know if I told you that most
No,
important
no, we
part.
didn't. Go ahead and tell us about the book.
Okay. Well, first of all, people should know that I have a few publications out there. One was uh, I don't know the name of it, but it's the main article for Golden Age of the Moors. It's on the Berbers and Arabs. Okay, so that came out in 1991, I think, in Golden Age of the Moors, and that I actually worked with Dr. Van Sertima, to have him bring out that book on the Moors.
And
And then
somebody
there's
asked, what's the title of the book?
Golden Age of the Moors, and
Uh,
that was edited by Dr. Van Sertima, and I have a centerpiece article in there. The centerpiece article is my article. Then I have in Egypt, Child of Africa, there's another article on the Mediterranean race. It's called The Myth of the Mediterranean Race, I think. And it just talks about how this idea of Negro and Negroid developed in attempts to take out the black or the the African, sub-Saharan African, West Africans out of the ancient Mediterranean and Near East.
hmm.
And they have this another article that was published by an academic journal called Fear of Blackness, which talks about some metaphor. It's not, somebody got upset that I used the word blackness on another site. It's a metaphor for how the Moors, their skin color, how their skin color was described, and who they were exactly in the West African and Sudanic area. How those people that were Moors actually have drifted down further south and were affiliated with the Songhai, Ghana, Malian people, okay, or Man-Sunning people, as well as the Tuareg, who are also once, black people living up there. So that came out as an issue, Fear of Blackness, and it's another subtitle, which I don't remember the name. That came out in 2014 on West Africa Review. So if you go there, you can find that issue, and maybe, I don't know if you have to subscribe to get it, but I can't send it to anybody because I don't have the copyright. So that's been being made into a book right now as we speak, because it's a whole issue. That's actually a whole issue. But I'm working on another book right now for another publisher, an academic publisher. And that's not going to be on the Hebrews, the original Hebrews, and their connection to the Yemen and the Afro-Asiatic people. Now, I'm not going to focus so much on the connection to the Afro-Asiatic, the fact they were black and all that stuff. But by the time I'm done the book, people will know, that's who I'm talking about. Because a lot of people don't even know these people exist. And the ones that do know have been trying to make them into descendants of slaves and that kind of thing. The people, and I'm talking about wherever you go in the Near East or Middle East or Asia, there are always people in the West, especially in some parts of American academia and African America, that are trying to make these people into descendants of slaves. And not all people, whether it be the Gulf area, whether it be Central Arabia or south of the Dead Sea, where a lot of these people still live, in Jordan, in North Africa, there are still people, in Iran and the Makran area of Pakistan, there are people that are both descendants of the original indigenous Makran people, as well as, descendants of slaves that were brought in later. Same thing for India. The Dravidians are not, they're not people who were originally straight-haired people or light-skinned people. Original Dravidians were kinky-haired black people affiliated, in fact, called Kushites up into the 15th century. The Kalam Kushites, another name for the Sumerians, Kalam, the original name. And you find the same thing among the Kunlun people of East Asia, in China, people trying to say that those were, okay, well, they were slaves, but that they were African slaves. They weren't African slaves. There's people that have been there in that area for tens of thousands of years that were black. Okay? And there's also people that were brought over or that came over as Arabs that also contributed to those people and extending to the Philippines that were black. So that area of Java, when Jahiz talks about the Masin and the Sin being parts of the Sudanic world, he's talking about those people, not, the regular people we think of now as Chinese. We're talking about Indo-Chinese black people that used to be in those areas of Cambodia, Burma, and all other places. They were called ink black. They were described as ink black people. And they were also called Zanj because by that time the word Zanj came to be identified as black people in general for the Arab and Persian people, or for the I should say Arabized Persian people, Arabized Syrian people, Arabized Syrian people, the Arabized Iraqi people. All these people are Arabized people. They're not necessarily by genetics the same people that were in Arabia, because, like I said, the people that were in Arabia were the same people that were in Africa, and are ancestors of the Africans and were descendants of Africans. They were Afro-Asiatic people that looked like Afro-Asiatic people, and extended over to the Indus Valley and even into China. They have in the Mogao caves, they have those people that were extended into India and into China, and the Turkish people, even in Turkmenistan and Central Asia, there were black Siberians and black Huns. The earliest Huns were black. And they said, Herodotus said there was only one white Hunnish people. So, yeah. But the point is, this stuff is coming up. But the more important point is that that the ancient history behind the ancient heritage of the belief system that the Hebrews and these people had, they recognized the divine one, but in several different aspects, or the Jews, for example, they worshiped Yahweh as the one God, but the Israelites in general, they actually had more than one deity, but they were recognized as parts of the whole, the one divine creator. So that was my point in researching this. And since I've been a teenager, I was looking at J. Rogers' books as a teenager in the 70s, and the early 80s. So, and that's when I got in touch with Dr. Van Sertima about this stuff. So, yeah, and so you can have me back, and hopefully we got straightened up that Edomite stuff.
Yeah.
If you go through, if anybody has a Bible, if you go through, each name of those Edomites are still there in southern Arabia, and most of them are still black. Okay. The Edomite, Zibian is called a Horite, right? But he's also called a Hivite, and that's because the Hivites of Canaan and the Horites of Edom were, those people were connected. They were all the same people. The Banu Dubian are people of Yemen. There's Zibian. Zibian is a Horite, or of the Harat people, Harathites, Banu Harith. So, so this is what I'm working on in my book, to show how all these people were and are located in Yemen. And one last thing I should say is that, so my friend David, who was the head of a Hebrew college called Dropsy College. The reason why I call him my friend is because we've been, in touch for a while, and he supports what I do in terms of, researching into the Yemenite or Southern Arabian origins of these true Israelite people, and actually has written an endorsement for my book that's coming out, Fear of Blackness, but also, like I said, he supports this research into the early Israel in Yemen theory, or the early Israel in Southern Arabia theory, because some people think it's Assyria in Southern Arabia, Southwest Arabia, and others think it's the Yemen, but it's probably in between both. It's both areas. And the Yemen, like I said, really referred to the whole entire area of most of Saudi Arabia was included in the Yemen in the early medieval times.
Okay.
So yeah, he was the head of a Dropsy College, which was part of the University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League college or university. So somebody of very high, repute in the world of Judaic studies, and also I think he was the editor for a Judean uh, journal, Jewish journal. So I got actually some of my information derived from him. Actually, his information confirms a lot of the earlier Afrocentric writers that were writing about people like the Colchians and other people that the European academics had refused to recognize as being black, that kind of thing. So anyway,
Okay.
I wanted to say,
All right.
yeah.
So, to all y'all viewers, that is Miss Dana Reynolds. I appreciate her coming on the show. Like I said, I'm going to have her come on again in the near future. And when I say in the near future, I'm talking about, I'm going to discuss it when we get off, when she wants to come back on.
You
And
can
it's
say
going to
tomorrow.
be more structured and organized because, like I said, we ran into those technical difficulties and it made things a little bit difficult. What were you
Yeah.
saying, sis?
No, I said you could say tomorrow if you want.
Okay.
No,
But
but
yeah, so like
let's,
I said, we're gonna get it set up. Like I said, it's gonna be more organized, and it's gonna be a lot more information, and we'll have the slides up and going correctly. But anyway, Miss Dana Reynolds, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everybody tuning in to watch. Definitely subscribe to the Spiritual Combat YouTube channel and follow me and subscribe on Facebook also so you can get the notifications when anytime I come on with a show like this. And anyway, with that said, I am gonna wrap this one up. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Shalom and
so,
shalom.